From the nation's capital, the Conservative Caucus presents Conservative Roundtable, an in-depth look at today's most important issues.
Welcome to Conservative Roundtable. I'm Howard Phillips, chairman of the Conservative Caucus, which sponsors Conservative Roundtable, now being seen coast to coast all over the United States of America and also in Alaska and Hawaii. Our guest for this edition of Conservative Roundtable is Sean Parnell, who is the head of the Center for Competitive Politics. Sean, would you explain what the Center for Competitive Politics is?
Sure. The Center is a nonprofit organization that focuses on protecting, promoting, and defending the First Amendment political rights of speech, assembly, and petition. In practice, that means opposing things like the Fairness Doctrine, campaign finance regulations that limit how much citizens can give to candidates or causes of their choice, things along those lines that really restrict the rights of Americans to fully participate in the political process.
Your founder was a former chairman, or is a former chairman of the Federal Election Commission.
Yes. Brad
Smith, now a law professor in Ohio, and a courageous and a good man. Now, we're going to focus in this broadcast on the recent Supreme Court decision, a 5-4 decision, that basically struck down a significant portion of federal election laws. This has been a topic of great personal interest to me. I followed this since I first got involved in politics, and I wrote some articles about it all the way back in 1974, when the federal election law amendments of that year were signed by Jerry Ford, who wimped out on his constitutional duty. During his State of the Union message, Obama took an inaccurate swipe at the Supreme Court, and Samuel Alito moved his lips. You're wrong, basically, is what he was saying.
Indeed.
What did the Supreme Court ruling determine?
Sure. What the Supreme Court ruling basically says is that American citizens do not lose their First Amendment rights simply because they choose to speak on politics through the corporate form, whether that's a for-profit corporation, a nonprofit advocacy group, a union organization. Prior to the Citizens United ruling,
this was the Citizens United ruling.
Yes. Because
Dave Bossie and his organization, during the heat of the campaign, wanted to put out a film about Hillary Clinton.
Yes, a very
and they were blocked from doing so.
That's correct. They wanted to promote their movie through commercials on television, and they wanted to offer it through video on demand for people who wanted to watch the movie. And the FEC came in and said, no, you can't do that. You're a corporation. This looks too much like you're advocating that people vote against Hillary Clinton. We just can't allow you to do this.
I thought the language was you have to explicitly advocate election or defeat in order to break the law.
That's generally the understanding, but recently, partly thanks to the McCain-Feingold legislation, they sort of expanded that to, if you criticize somebody, or even if you go so far as to mention their name in an election-related context, you can potentially be prevented from speaking, from spending money to air your ads. So what what Citizens United, this group that had this movie, did was they appealed. They wound up in front of the Supreme Court. It was interesting. This case was actually argued twice before the Supreme Court. The first time that they did it, the government was so bold as to say, in response to a question from, I believe, Justice Alito, that yes, if we want to ban books, we can under certain circumstances. This took a lot of people by surprise. It didn't actually take me by surprise, because this is sort of the logical extension of all of these campaign finance regulations, is the government directly coming in and saying, no, you can't speak. We can ban these books if we want to. So the case wound up then being re-argued in front of the Supreme Court, and of course in January of this year the court came back and said no, you can't prohibit groups from Citizens United from airing movies, from broadcasting them, from speaking out either in favor or in support of candidates. And furthermore, no incorporated entity can be prohibited from using general treasury funds to air these sorts of things.
Now, I read the 5-4 ruling and including the concurring opinion by Justice Thomas. And I must say that Justice Thomas had the best language of any. I mean, his concurrence was brilliant. And he pointed out how outrageous it was to think that one could go to prison for violating the First Amendment.
Exactly.
Or for adhering to the First Amendment.
Yeah.
Thomas was brilliant. What a magnificent concurring opinion it was.
And Thomas's opinion, he was the only one of the 9 justices who also really understood what was at stake with the disclosure issue. You know, right now...
Why don't you explain that?
Sure. Right now, if somebody contributes to a candidate over a certain amount, that has to be put on public record. And, I mean, there's some good reasons for direct contributions directly to candidates.
But they can be targets of harassment.
They can then be targets of harassment, which is one of the reasons why we think that the disclosure thresholds should be raised.
And we're looking at a perfect example of this in Proposition 8 in California.
Exactly.
Where people signed petitions opposing same-sex marriage, and they're now subject to extraordinary harassment.
Yeah. And probably the most alarming example of this was a lady who had contributed to John Edwards' campaign in the 2004 presidential race.
It wasn't the one he impregnated.
No, not that one.
Okay.
But anyways, she had contributed $500 to John Edwards, and because of that, because her name was publicly disclosed on his disclosure forms, you have to list your employer and occupation on those. Well, it turns out she worked for a pharmaceutical company that, like all pharmaceutical companies, engages in animal testing on their products. She wound up on an animal rights terrorist, basically hit list online because her information was disclosed. I mean, there are some real serious problems with disclosure, and Justice Thomas in his
it was a brilliant concurrence.
Yeah, he was the only one that picked up on that.
I think he's the best one on the court. He's fantastic. The big lie is that the Supreme Court decision permits corporations to give money to candidates. That's not true.
It's not true at all. It's one of the things that the so-called reform movement has really spent a lot of time trying to blur the issue and confuse people on, making it sound like now AT&T can give $1 million to anybody they want to. They can't. They can't give one dime to any candidate. All that they can do is run an ad saying, we think that this candidate is good for business or bad for our business. We think you should vote for them. And unions have the right now to run ads saying, we think this candidate is bad for working families. We don't think you should vote for him. That's all that this decision does. And, you know, a lot of people out across the country, I think, are really interested in knowing what the opinions are of major employers or even small employers in their districts. If I live in a congressional district and let's say Anheuser-Busch is a major employer in my district, I want to hear from Anheuser-Busch if they think somebody's going to be bad for the beer industry, because I might decide that that's bad for my community if I know that.
Isn't it wonderful that David Souter and Sandra Day O'Connor resigned from the court when they did? Because the outcome would have been different.
It certainly made this, well, Souter's resignation, not so much. It was O'Connor that was the one who, for some reason, fell for the big lie of McCain-Feingold and thinking that this was all okay to do to squelch people's First Amendment rights.
She's a bad girl on many, many issues.
She certainly did not get it right on this one.
Yeah. Well, we're going to have to take a break. And when we come back, I want you to tell us what the critics of the Supreme Court ruling are planning. What is up their sleeve, and what do they hope to achieve? Stay with us. We'll be back with Sean Parnell of the Center for Competitive Politics right after these messages.
You are a defender of liberty. You spoke out.
That is part of your job.
You were heard in Congress.
No.
You marched. You created a new movement. You endured attacks.
You see folks waving tea bags around.
Now, you can help to
repeal the bill.
Go to sendthematmessage.com. Print the pledge to repeal Obamacare. Send it to your representative, senators, and candidates to sign that they pledge to
Repeal the bill. Repeal the bill.
Repeal the bill.
Repeal the bill.
Repeal the bill. Repeal the bill. Repeal the bill. Repeal the bill.
Repeal the bill! Now!
Go to sendthematmessage.com and help.
Repeal the bill.
Hey, listen. This is the greatest thing. I want to tell you something. Something's happening in this country. And I want to tell you, look around my friends here. My friends here in Washington, come over here. See all these great people? These great folks are here because they want to take the country back to the direction of the Founding Fathers and stop all this nonsense that's going on and stop this, immersion into socialism, which is happening. We've got to stop it. And every day we're losing a little bit of our freedom. But the answer is that the individual citizens can make a difference. They can walk through these houses of Congress. They can look their congressman in the eye and say, hey, vote this bill down. Get rid of it. We got a lot of work to do. And the first thing we have to do is get rid of the garbage and the attacks on our freedoms. This is it. So anyway, that's what these guys are doing here today to do. Yes! And I say, all of you guys out there, with the sound of my voice and the visual that this great gentleman has created, get down here and do your responsible citizenship by going and seeing your representatives and telling them, what you want, because this is your house. It's not their house. Yeah. Get in there and tell them what to do, and let's begin cleaning this country up. A big mess has been created in only a year's time, in 9 months' time, really. A big mess we have to recover from. We got to start working. We got to throw some people out. So anyway, I love this country. I love you. Go do your job. Thank you for your help. Thank you.
Welcome back. I'm Howard Phillips, chairman of the Conservative Caucus, which sponsors Conservative Roundtable, and our guest is Sean Parnell, the president of the Center for Competitive Politics. Now, there's been a lot of screaming and moaning by the liberals about how horrible this Supreme Court decision was. Many misrepresentations about what it actually did, including a big one by Barack Hussein Obama in his State of the Union message. What do you think the liberals are planning legislatively to try to undo the good news of the Supreme Court decision?
Sure, and it's important to note, I think, that this isn't just, a left versus right issue. There are a lot of liberals, particularly like at the ACLU, that are very good on this issue, and there are a lot of people on the right that tend to favor campaign finance regulation. Like John McCain.
Although he's been very silent, given the fact that he's facing a very tough primary.
He has not spent as much time on this issue as you might have thought. But anyways, what the other side is, looking to do in Congress right now, there's a couple of bills that have been filed by Congressman Alan Grayson of Florida.
A very bad fellow.
Well, his bills, fortunately, are not being taken very seriously. Right. There are things like imposing a 500% tax on independent expenditures that nobody who's serious about this issue believes is going anywhere. It's mostly a lot of grandstanding on his part. But there is a serious effort in the Senate and the House coming from the Democratic leadership. Senator Chuck Schumer and Congressman Chris Van Hollen are working on...
The leaders of the Senate and the House campaign committees from the Democrats.
I think Schumer is the former.
Right.
Menendez is the current.
Right.
But yes,
you're exactly right.
That's where this is coming from. And they haven't yet introduced legislation, but they have released an outline of what it is that they would like to do. And it's kind of a mixed bag. Some of it's kind of harmless stuff. They want to really toughen up the restrictions on foreign corporations from being able to air independent expenditures, which we're fine with that sort of thing, preventing foreign citizens from...
Except that many of these foreign corporations have U.S. citizens as their employees. And that complicates the issue.
It does complicate the issue, and we're actually working to try and educate them to make sure that, no, we don't want the sovereign wealth fund of Saudi Arabia to be coming in here running ads. But on the other hand, something like Honda of North America that does employ American citizens, pays American taxes, and has revenues from America, they should be able, we think, to run an ad. And people can say, if they want to, I'm not comfortable taking, political advice from a foreign corporation or domestic subsidiary, and they can,
Sure.
ignore that if they want to. But then they're also trying to do other
Toyota
things.
better not get involved in this.
Toyota might have some brand name issues at this point. Yeah, I don't know that anybody wants to see Toyota advertising on their behalf
Right.
in their district. But then there are other things that they're looking at trying to do that would really try and impose new burdens on corporations and unions and advocacy groups, things like disclosure requirements, things that might potentially get into some of the disclosure issues we were talking about earlier, where you are exposing citizens to harassment and being threatened with their livelihood.
And there's the whole question of privacy.
Exactly, the whole question of privacy. So that's moving through, or going to be introduced shortly in the House and the Senate, and we expect to be involved educating Congress and the American public on that issue. But then the other thing that's going on that's really kind of interesting is that the so-called reform community has really latched on to the idea of taxpayer-funded political campaigns.
Which is an outrage. That's like requiring someone to subsidize somebody else's church.
Exactly. Your tax dollars potentially could go to a Lyndon LaRouche, who has qualified for your taxpayer dollars in the past, actually. So there's this bill in Congress called the Fair Elections Now Act that essentially is a huge scam. The way they've set it up is such that if you're an incumbent, you're not going to have any trouble qualifying for millions of taxpayer dollars. If you're running for Senate in one of the larger states, potentially tens of millions of taxpayer dollars. And if you're, backed by your party establishment or well-organized interest groups, you're also going to be able to, find it relatively easy to qualify.
Well, if they're really serious about reform, they need to tackle the particular advantages that incumbent legislators at the federal level have. It's been calculated that the value of incumbency is a minimum of $2 million per election cycle. The staffs,
yep.
the travel, the franking privilege. Mm-hmm. The franking privilege
yes.
is a way in which incumbents can campaign for themselves at taxpayer expense. If they really want to make reform, abolish the frank.
I don't know about abolishing the frank, because there potentially is some value in it, but you're absolutely right. The power of incumbency is already enormous, and what the Fair Elections Now Act does is simply adds to those already substantial advantages. So that's something that the other side has really put an effort into, which frankly is kind of strange, because on the one hand, these people, these reformers, are bemoaning the fact that somebody who's a corporate shareholder in, let's say, AT&T, that a company that they own a part of might run a political ad favoring a candidate that they oppose, and this is terrible and you're violating this person's right. But on the other hand, making all taxpayers do the exact same thing, use their taxpayer dollars to fund a campaign that they despise, they don't have any problem at all with.
It's a very important point. And it goes back to an historically significant case in which Patrick Henry was involved in the early days of the Republic, where he challenged the obligation, or it was challenged, the obligation was challenged of supporting the Anglican Church.
Right, yes.
And
that is exactly what we're talking about.
This is a similar deal.
Yep,
now, what are some of the other cases wending their way through the courts?
Sure. There's a couple of cases out there right now. We actually have litigation that we are co-counsel with the Institute for Justice. We're representing a group called SpeechNow.org. they want to, they're a group of citizens, they want to pool their money and run ads that say vote for this person or don't vote for that person based on whatever issue they choose. And it's actually First Amendment and campaign finance is their issue. And the FEC, just like they did with Citizens United, has come in and said, no, you can't do this, or at least you can't do this without adhering to all of these very burdensome regulations and these contribution limits. So that case was heard in front of the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals a couple of weeks ago. We are very hopeful that we'll be getting a ruling within the next month or two on that case that will actually, we think, build on the Citizens United decision, and this time allow individual citizens to pool their money without any limits to air ads that, urge their fellow citizens to vote one way or another on any given candidate. So there's that litigation. There are also several states out there that currently have these taxpayer funding schemes, and most of them have what they call rescue funds provisions, where if you're a candidate running for office and you're participating in the program, you're taking taxpayer dollars, and I am not, and if I outspend you, then the government is going to give you more money. And so basically the message that's sent to me as a candidate is don't spend more than the participating candidate, because we're just going to shove more money in the pockets of the guy you're challenging. So a federal judge in Connecticut struck down their program based in part on this. A federal judge out in Arizona struck down that particular provision of Arizona's program. We're involved in both cases. We've filed amicus briefs urging the courts to uphold the lower court ruling, striking down these bans. There's another case in Wisconsin that we're involved in, the same issue as far as taxpayer dollars to match non-participating candidates' expenditures, and that one, we'll see where that goes.
So you say we. That's a lot of work for a small organization. How many people have you on your staff?
We have a total of 8 people on our staff. We also we're very fortunate to have a number of attorneys around the country who are very interested in this issue, and some of them volunteer to do it pro bono. Some of them are willing to work for attorney recovery fees. We're able to contract with lawyers around the country so that we can amplify what we do.
Well, keep up the great work. We're going to take another break, and when we come back, there'll be a couple of minutes, and the time will be all yours.
All right.
Stay with us. We'll be right back with Sean Parnell of the Committee for Competitive Politics.
Hi, I'm Marsha Blackburn from Tennessee's 7th Congressional District. Just as you hear every couple of years, this is an important election. And I think for those of us who are conservatives, this is indeed a very crucial election. Everything's on the ballot, and this is one of those years to show up and be counted and make your conservative voice heard. Whether it is reducing federal spending, reducing the size of the bureaucracy, or securing our border. These are issues that are of primary importance to us, and I hope that all of our conservatives are going to show up and vote to protect faith, family, freedom, hope, and opportunity.
Hi, I'm United States Representative Thaddeus McCotter from Michigan's 11th Congressional District. As we enter a new millennium of hope and peril, with so many problems besetting our country and yet so many opportunities before us, it is oftentimes tempting to think that your voice doesn't matter. What can one person do to make a difference in the life of their community and their country? Well, the first thing you can do is to contact your legislator. You are one of the sovereign citizens of the United States. You elect your servants to work for you in Congress. Let them know what you think. Send them a letter, send them an email, call them on the phone. Your voice matters. Because if you don't raise your voice in the interests of our free republic, who will?
Thank you for joining us for another edition of Conservative Roundtable. I'm Howard Phillips, chairman of the Conservative Caucus, which sponsors Roundtable, now being broadcast all over the United States If you can't find a local channel, you can check us out on YouTube. And we'd love to get you involved in the work of the Conservative Caucus. If you'll drop us a note, we will be happy to send you at no cost or obligation samples of our publications, updates on our activities. Be happy to send you some samples of my twice-monthly newsletter, the Howard Phillips Issues and Strategy Bulletin, and our members' message. And I think you'll find yourself better informed if you go over these materials. It's been a real privilege to have Sean Parnell as our guest. We have just a couple of minutes left, and Sean, the time is yours.
Thank you, Howard. If there's one takeaway that I hope people will remember from this, it's that so-called campaign finance reform in its modern guise has really been around for about 35 years, and it's never worked. It's never done what it was promised to do. I mean, in 1974, we were told that if you put contribution limits on politicians, then politics will all of a sudden become clean. The American people will have so much more confidence in government. If you just, violate the Constitution, the First Amendment in this one little regard. And, it obviously didn't work there, and it's just snowballed ever since then. The regulations have grown more and more intrusive. More and more taxpayer dollars is being shoved in the pockets of candidates.
Sean, but before we close out the broadcast, let me just recite what this is all about, the First Amendment and the Bill of Rights. Here's what it says. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or of the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. So Congress cannot abridge the freedom of speech. And all of these election law
That's exactly it.
legislations, laws, abridge our freedom of speech.
Congress shall make no law. It shouldn't be this difficult.
That's right. Well, it's been a pleasure having you with us. Keep up the good work.
I'll do that. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for joining us on Conservative Roundtable.